I feel like this month can be best described as a mixed bag. Had some good stuff happen, had some bad stuff happen. I have a fair bit of talking points, so I think I'm just going to jump right into it. So probably the first thing to mention. Being this long on HRT, I can tell when the hormone levels just aren't sitting right. Whenever my T levels start to rise, I find I have to shave more often. I'm horny again, which I really can't stand. On top of that, my appetite just bursts through the roof. All of which on their own I really hate, but it's also a sign of something that I hate even more. And I had a blood test this month, where I found out what my levels were at. And, yeah, my T levels have just been steadily rising. Which is very confusing, as I've been pretty much on the same prescription of T blocker for about maybe 2 years at this point. I can't understand why in the world it's just not working anymore. It just feels like my body wants its revenge, wants to take over, and I don't want that. I like being a woman. This is just so much better than what life was ever before. But there was definitely one perk to it. They finally corrected my gender on my blood tests. It was always the most annoying thing because it would always still list me as male. So as such, it always told me I had a ludicrously high estrogen level and a very low testosterone level. But now that I'm listed as female, it's actually telling me if I'm in a good range or not. One other thing I want to mention. I'm going to be pretty vague on the details, but essentially during the summertime in my work, we hire a bunch of temporary interns in order to take care of the increased workload during the summer. And one of them had my dead name. So that was definitely a complicated one. It's just always confusing whenever they try to call him over. Every so often I would just kind of go out of instinct because, well, I've been having people call me that name for about 20... Well, people are still calling me that name, but that's another story. But at least 20 years, people have only really started to call me Julia like 2.5, 3 years ago. So obviously it's gonna take a while for me to get used to not responding to the old name and only responding to the new name. I would respond to the new name, alright, just call me Julia. I'd be like, yeah, what do you want? It just annoys me so much that there's still a part of me that's like, you talking to me? Wait, that's not who I am anymore. I am Julia. I am a woman. I do not have that name. Another big thing to mention that happened this month is I got COVID again. I was hoping we would be done with this, but much like Furby, it somehow still keeps making a comeback. And the timing of it all was just really annoying. As those of you that have watched most of the videos on my channel, you'll notice that I was playing a lot of this mod for Ocarina of Time called Legend of Zelda: The Sealed Palace. In there, I was very much able to practice and even get a halfway decent femme voice as I was doing it. But then I got COVID, and I could not speak for like 3 days. And now it feels like I just kind of have to start all over again. Now here's some people that are able to pick it up within just a few months, and I'm very jealous of them. Then again, I'm also jealous of other trans women that pass without even being on hormones. And here I am, almost 3 years in, and people are still calling me sir. I don't know what it is. Do I have like a very masculine jawline? Is it because of the stupid Adam's apple? Or is it because most of the time this is what my voice sounds like? Could be a lot of things. It's a lot like trying to figure out why you didn't get that one job. You'll drive yourself nuts trying to figure it out. Just gotta figure out how to move on, try again somewhere else. So during my quarantine, I saw another video by a YouTuber I've tuned into every so often. Her name is Lily Alexandre. Kind of talking more about the philosophical side of being trans, as well as discussions among other alphabet soup committees. And the video I watched was all about why queer discourse is so toxic. I'm reminded of this one short essay I remember reading in college. It was called, "You Want to Be an Extremist? Hang out with only those you agree with." And the author of the video very much made a similar point. The idea that there are so many different subsects and so many different groups that you can basically find a group for anything that you like. And the big problem with that is if you only hang out with the people you 100% agree upon, you're shutting yourself off against different ideas. And on top of that, when you only hear one way of existing, you then start to believe that there is no other way of existing. So if somebody exists in a different way, then they must be wrong, they are evil, and they are poisoning the minds of all the people that believe in what you believe. And it was also interesting as she also touched upon very famous historical figures in the story of the Alphabet Soup Committee. And it's interesting how a lot of these historical figures have almost risen to the idea of sainthood. The idea that they were such a pure force of good that whatever they did was always right, or they were the one that struck the first blow to light the match, to start the explosion, and all that other stuff. When if you go more into the history of it, well, they were just people, like all of us. It's interesting how some people kind of want to latch on to this idea of godhood. The idea that because the person is such a divine being that everything they did was right, so if you follow their example, then you have to be right as well. Which, that's not really something I personally agree with. Like, a lot of people hated the Star Wars sequels because of Rey being just that. Perfect. Can never do anything wrong. That's not relatable, that's not interesting. I like people that are people. And what do people do? They struggle. And that right there is one of the reasons I love reading the autobiography of Christine Jorgensen. She was another woman. She had problems. She had faults. And the thing I love about her is how she was able to say, yeah, upon hindsight, I made an awful decision there. But at the end, she learned from it, and thus was able to become a better person because of it. And one of the other points that Lily brought up in this video is the idea of how the internet works. It's all about getting the most clicks, getting the hottest reaction. And how do you do that? You make people angry. So as such, you might see people resorting to articles with titles that are meant to inspire inflammatory responses, or to try to shock the viewer. This is probably something you might have seen in video titles or thumbnails. And when you build an economy of hate and anger, that is when people start to break off into groups, which I already mentioned earlier, which in turn leads to tribalism. And that's where the infighting comes from. Now on to something that very much surprised me. So a very long time ago, like I want to say when we were in senior year in high school and started transitioning into college, we all still wanted to stay together, so we used Skype, like everybody else did at that time period. And well, after a while, Skype just wasn't really the best one anymore, so then we all transferred to Discord. Well, when we made the move to Discord, there was one friend of ours that never used it. And then all of a sudden, this month, he remembered the password, and he was able to come on and say hello. Which is really interesting as, well, last time I saw him was a New Year's Eve party, and that was way before the transition. I was a little annoyed that I wasn't able to tell him directly, rather the topic was introduced in a fun way. It was one of my friends basically saying, "We're a bunch of old men. I'm the only one that escaped by becoming a youthful woman." And I'm just like, no, I wanted to say it. But that opened the topic, so it was a little easier to get started with. And I wanted to have some fun with him. I basically just said, yeah, I'm a girl now. But like anybody I come out to, I always give them the opportunity to ask questions. It seems like for a lot of people, I'm the first trans person in their lives, and I want to make sure they're getting more accurate information. Because, going back to the topic of earlier, people know only the shocking parts of it. I want to make sure I clear up that image a little bit. So it was rather fun. Well, he took it. I basically just said, yeah, I've been transitioning for almost 3 years now. My name is Julia, and he's just like, oh, hey, congrats. You know, that's good. That's nice. Even though it's been several years late, but, well, I don't care. I've always believed in the philosophy better late than never. And that is definitely the case in this transition, because I can't imagine a life where I did not transition. This is fantastic. So on the topic of rather strange conversations, this is one I never thought I would have as a woman, let alone with another woman. So there's this other trans woman that's a friend of mine. We chat every so often. And one night we spent an hour or two just talking about what we like about women. Which just seems like such a guy thing. Kind of the idea of like, ooh, you know, brunette is superior. No, it's all about the top, not the bottom. Are you kidding me? But what about the luscious gobby lips? Who cares about lips? It's all about the eyebrows. Well, that last one was just me not doing a good job on improv, because I can't imagine there's too many men that find eyebrows very nice looking. I can't imagine there's too many men thinking about eyebrows. But it was a lot of fun. On the tail end of that conversation was something I found very interesting. So, for me, women and girls, by extension, were utterly terrifying. I was taught from a very young age, you gotta treat them very specially. You can't be rough and tumble with girls as you are with boys. You can't be in the same room with one for too long, otherwise people might get the wrong idea. You can't look at them the wrong way. And you gotta make sure that you have good, clean speech, otherwise they might accuse you of having impure thoughts. Stuff like that. And it was just an interesting perspective change, because this other trans woman I was talking with, for her it was the opposite. Men were the scary ones, while for her it was a lot easier to be able to talk to other women. Kind of the idea that maybe she related to them a lot more. And only now do I feel like I'm starting to relate more to women. In fact, the big thing I found is women are a lot less scarier when you are one. You're basically just another one at the party. So as I get closer to bottom surgery, this is something I've been going over a lot the past few sessions with my therapist, and, well, maybe it's because it's getting closer, or maybe it's just because I know more about it. It's honestly sounding a bit more scary. Like, I just don't have the tools to be able to handle this properly. Like, the more I hear about it, if there's like a chance of infection, or if the surgery is botched, or if they have to go back in there again, that is going to be more sick time than I actually have. And if it's not covered by insurance, that's going to be more money than I can afford. It's more time out of the office that there may be a more likely chance that when I come back, there might not be a job for me. Or even worse, a source of income. So, I mean, I kind of thought I had this under control. I thought I did my own research. I was prepared. I knew the basics of what to expect, especially with the consultation I had with the first doctor. But, yeah, I'm starting to wonder if this is even possible now. It's just starting to seem a little more and more out of my reach. And on top of that, maybe it's just me, but I feel like there's a timer on this. I'm only getting older, and as I get older, I'm getting more unhealthier. And I want to do this while I'm young and healthy to ensure quick recovery time. If I'm going to have to wait like another 5 or 6 years in order to pay for this as well as have the sufficient time, it could be possible that maybe I wouldn't be healthy enough, or maybe I wouldn't be eligible enough for this kind of surgery. Which, that kind of has me spiraled into a bit of a depression right there, because, well, I do not want to be stuck with what I've got. It gets a little worse every time I look at it. I just wish it could go away. And the longer I hold on to it, I'm even more tempted to just rip it out myself. But then the logic part of me steps in, and I'm like, I gotta spend the rest of my life like this. I want to make sure I do it right the first time. And I think one of the other problems I ran into as well was, is the surgeon I'm going to experienced? Like, my therapist was saying the idea of if they did like 100 or more surgeries, that would mean that they're satisfactory. And maybe this is just my own personal bias, but I just didn't think there were that many trans women out there that had bottom surgery. And so that's another thing to consider, is if I find out that my surgeon is not qualified, well, cost only goes up from there, not only for the hospital stays, but the lodging and the food, and it's just money. Sometimes I wish there was like some sort of grant for this, but then again, I don't want to be a freeloader. As you can see, I am the boulder in this circumstance. I am very conflicted. This video is getting a bit longer than I anticipated, and in all honesty, a little deeper than I thought it would as well. So I'm going to end with this last point. So during this month, I got reacquainted with a favorite game of mine, Perfect Dark. However, this time, I played it with Mario characters, or as I like to call it, Perfect Peach. And after playing through the single player on Perfect Agent, I wanted to get more into the multiplayer. And there I found my old save file, which, wow, it's got to be at least 10 years old at this point. And it was just such a weird snapshot about who I was at that time. The character I made for the game was as close as I could get to the fabled Sean Connery model in GoldenEye. And it's funny, now at this time when I'm playing the multiplayer again, I played it with Bowsette, with long brown hair. And the thing I love about it is, if you look at the way the character holds the gun, she has black nail polish on with very pointed nails. And that excites me, much like how the white suit excited me. And it really got me thinking. When I first started transitioning, I saw it as just going under new management. Instead of being on T, I would be on E. Instead of being dead name, I'd be Julia. But I would essentially still be the same person. But as I go further along, I feel like there's more and more of a disconnect of who I used to be and who I am now. Like, I would imagine when most people look back at an old photo of themselves, there might be one of two reactions. Either, ugh, I can't believe I used to like Sugar Ray, or, wow, I wonder whatever happened to that old t-shirt. I wish I still had that. For me, it's different. When I look back at old photos of myself, well, the first thing I'm reminded of is why I did not like looking in the mirror, because, wow, I was hideous. And this, to me, this is so much more beautiful. I like this. It's gotten to the point now where I almost have to kind of pull myself away from the mirror. I might even be blushing at myself because I can't believe I'm actually this pretty. And I know I mentioned this in one of my other update videos, but at times it feels more like I killed the younger me and I've been cursed to experience all his memories. It's just an odd disconnect. It's a feeling I never really thought I could have. And I don't even know how to put it into words, in all honesty. I feel like this is a part of the trans experience that not a whole lot of people talk about. So if you're making a movie, writing a book, have that be one of your main themes. The idea that as you get closer to your ideal self, you start to lose track of who you used to be. So yes, like I said at the beginning of this video, mixed bag. As always, if there's anything else you would like to talk about, feel free to leave a comment down below. And as always, I will not talk about politics. Until next time, be yourself, no matter who that is.